Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Bestwick.
And I'm Gemma Files, and this, of course, is No Darkness But Ours.
This is the third part of our deep dive into Near Dark, Kathryn Bigelow's 80s vampire classic, and the first of 3 collaborations with screenwriter Eric Red. You'll find a link to parts 1 and 2 in the description below. Maybe what saves May isn't just so much the love for Caleb. There's some quality in herself that even everything she's done
because she thinks about eternity. She has that interesting thing that she says to Caleb right at the beginning, where she says, do you see them stars?
Yeah.
Light from those stars. It's going to take 1,000,000 years to reach here. And when it does, those stars will be dead, but I'll still be here. That's why you never met no girl like me.
Exactly.
So she's, or even her thing about the night being so bright, that there's a beauty in her perceptions and her ability to, to not just move on to the next thing, to not just be a predator. I mean, she is a predator. Yeah, she's a very good predator, actually.
Yeah, but obviously, under it all, there was, unlike with Homer, unlike with Severin, unlike Diamondback and Jesse, there is some quality in her that resists what she's
been made. Severin is maybe a little smarter and more seeking than his 2 elder relatives, who are kind of not passive, but they're very relaxed with each other and relaxed with their system, but all his cleverness is cruelty.
Yeah,
that's all he cares about. It's like, I like to insult people. I like to make people attack me. I like to, get people into a position where they realize, it's like, I will play a gormless, dumb cowboy hick. It's like, you two are so good looking. Oh, it's like, are you 2 ladies looking to have some fun? It's like, and he just wants to get them in a position where they realize how fucked they are, how completely, it's like, you just lost your life. You gave me your life.
Yeah.
Over nothing.
Yeah, like you say, that triumvirate, him and Jesse and Diamondback, they're the core of it. They could go on forever. It starts to weaken. I mean, in a way, it starts to weaken when those aspects of humanity come out. Because if as you say, Homer was turned to provide Diamondback with a substitute child, because he's kind of the weak. Because he is. I mean, he's got the right personality profile in the sense that he's a psychopath. But at the same time, he's also he wants what he wants, and he doesn't have any sort of forethought about it at all.
And he's a coward. He's grown up enough to realize that he is the weakest member, the weakest link. They could leave him behind at any time. He could die at any time. And none of them would give a shit, because he doesn't provide anything for any of them anymore. It's like, even Diamondback, it's sort of like, well, it used to be nice when you thought of me as your mom, but now you're just a horrible old man. And you whine.
Yeah, but when he turns May, he's the weak link, and then in May he creates a weaker link in that unit, because he's
the thing is, I think they all like May better than they like Homer.
Oh yeah.
That's the weird part.
She's the weak link in the sense that, unlike the others, she has some aspects of humanity left in her. That
is her weakness. But she's very effective when she's with them. She knows how to play them, and they know that she knows how to play them. And you can see, Diamondback kind of smiling at her when when she plays up to Jesse, you know, and you can see Severin being like, I see what you're doing, you know, oh, gal, you know?
Yeah, but again, she's got some quality she's got the quality where she's not gonna be content with that, family
not
unit.
forever. She learns on her feet.
And where she will look beyond it, and that's why she reaches out to to Caleb.
Yeah.
And that connection is what ultimately brings about the collapse of the vampire family.
Yeah, you're perfectly correct. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the Eric Red story that when I was teaching when I was teaching at the Diploma Mill, the Toronto Film School, and I was one of my fellow teachers was a woman named Sherry Coleman, and Sherry came out of a screenwriting and TV script writing background, and one of her longest jobs was with a soap opera. Which was kind of interesting. She had some really interesting things to say about that and how, you have to rewrite constantly when you're working on a soap opera. But she was also, when she was down in the States, she was, I think it was in LA, and she had formed a screenwriting group, so everybody who wanted to make the jump to writing feature films, a bunch of them would come to this screenwriting group, and one of the people who came to the screenwriting group was Eric Red.
Woo.
And Eric Red at that time was, like a young dude from Texas or wherever, and she was sort of like, he was kind of like Bill Paxton, actually. And so he'd come in and he'd like, talk manically, and whenever he brought something in, it would always be full of incredible violence, incredible darkness and violence. And she, and I think he had brought, I think he definitely brought Near Dark in at one point, like the earliest version of Near Dark. And and every time he'd bring something in, everybody would pass it around, and then they'd like spend, I don't know, an hour or something telling him why it wasn't practical. Why, he needed likable characters, and he needed, it's like you need to understand that not many people want to see a movie that's just completely full of darkness and violence. And finally, he came in one night and he said, well, none of you have to worry about me anymore, because you remember that thing that you spent last week shitting on? I just sold it. So fuck all y'all. And he left.
I can understand that. I can understand that impulse.
Yeah, absolutely.
I used to go to a writer's workshop in South Manchester, and there were some lovely people there, don't get me wrong. But my stuff, especially as I kind of really started to, because I mean, when I started going there, I was in a bit of a creative bad patch where I'd kind of forgotten why it was I'd wanted to write in the first place, and felt sometimes like how to write. I remember though, I tried to write a crime novel, and the idea was it began with an act of violence by a mentally disturbed police officer, and his colleagues covered it up, and because the whole thing would evolve about years later about the victim's brother trying to find her.
Right.
It was important. I felt that there should be one scene from her point of view. The only scene where that was going to happen, that could be, was the scene where she was killed.
Yeah.
I tried to convey this, and everyone was just basically the general consensus was I needed psychiatric help, and I ended up deleting it, the whole chapter. So I haven't got a chance. I have no opportunity to reread it and find out if it was any good or not. But it does remind me very much of the Jean Cocteau thing. What other people criticize you for, cultivate, because that's your error.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, the more you lean specifically into, listen, there's packaging, and there's learning how to turn a phrase, and there's learning how to cut stuff out and put stuff in. But the more I think that you lean into what intrigues you, and you try to ask yourself why it intrigues you, why do you keep coming back to these things over and over and over again, the better things become. That's my personal feeling. And, it's like, so if I want to write about guys having sex and, and ghosts on the internet and,
you're so stronger, I think, as a writer, the moment you say, fucking what? I like writing about this shit.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what I like. This is
exactly.
I like, and this.
Why do all your characters feel like they've done something horribly wrong? Oh, I don't know. Because I've spent most of my life feeling like I've done something horribly wrong, and maybe what I did horribly wrong was to be born as a person, as me, was to be me. It's like, oh, there was your first mistake, man. It was your first mistake.
With regards to that chapter, which, as I said, the victim was this young woman this young woman being sexually assaulted and murdered.
Yes, yeah.
One of the people in the group, who would later who'd become quite well known, actually became a local councillor, was a lady called Sammy Mali.
Right.
And she kind of came to sort of prominence with a memoir called Belonging, where she had been at the age of 14, she was forcibly married to a guy in Pakistan, and basically wasn't allowed to come home until he'd impregnated her.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine, so her wedding night was basically pretty much a scene of horror.
Oh, yeah.
Again, I'm not telling tales out of school here, because this is stuff that she's written about and been very open about. And a big part of what she ended up doing was being very much an advocate against things like forced marriage. And it was remarkable to see her come in and first very, very quiet, shy. You wouldn't say booty because you could barely hear her. And then, she thought, well, I wasn't sure if anyone would be interested in my story. We were like, are you fucking kidding? And of course, she just went from strength to strength. When she realized people actually wanted to, that she did have a story that was worth listening to. And it very, very quickly became something that got published. And from the back of that, she went from working, selling in a ticket office or something to, as I say, running for the local council and winning and doing all this other stuff. So it was quite a journey in itself. But, she wasn't the group the night that I read that chapter, and one of her mutual friends said to me, "Thank God you weren't there. You would have been so disgusted. You'd been so offended." And she actually said to me, the fact that you managed to that you offended everyone probably means that you described it very well, or that you described it accurately. That you got it wrong.
Exactly. This is the thing. So in Eric Red and Kathryn Bigelow, we have, I don't know if a partnership per se, but we have a confluence of two people who consistently lean into the things that they are interested in.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that Kathryn Bigelow, who is someone who I had, the pleasure of hugging at one point, because I finally, I met her, I interviewed her for a movie of hers that I think was done at the absolute lowest point of her career, and may even not be available anymore, not be findable anymore. But it was a movie she did with Sarah Polley called The Weight of Water.
I think I've got it somewhere.
Yeah, and this was after K-13, The Widowmaker. And which was in a lot of ways the moment where Hollywood said, well, we're just not going to give you anything anymore. Kathryn, you're going to have to go to TV like every other female director, because obviously you were incapable of making a blockbuster film, even though we gave you Harrison Ford and,
Yeah.
Obviously, it's like there's something wrong with you because you keep making these movies that are hard to hoe. They're dark as fuck. They're full of violence. They're full of sexual violence. They're full of interrogation of gender. You know, it's like the most up thing she's probably ever made is is oh shit, Keanu Reeves, Patrick Swayze.
Point Break. Point Break.
Point Break. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, Point Break. Yeah, that's the most upper of a movie that she's ever made. You know, it's like it's like Point Break and The Hurt Locker. It's like those are the two. Those are the two that you come out going, I don't feel like killing myself. I don't feel like everything is terrible. She started off doing these almost experimental things, which were all about male on male violence.
Okay.
I always remember that her thesis film was essentially two guys having a long fist fight in fetishistic detail. And then she goes from that to a biker film with Willem Dafoe, so young he's almost Dewey, but he's still Willem Dafoe. Where as like the wild one, with the same leather leather outfit. All leather outfit, and
using Streets of Fire a few years later.
Yes, exactly, and it, where, at least with her, it was like, no, this is supposed to be fetishistic.
I know what I'm doing here.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to Streets of Fire, where I was just like, do you have any idea how fucking fetishistic this is?
Yeah, I know.
Like it. I absolutely like it.
Aspect of Streets of Fire was the idea that Willem Dafoe's character would have the least interest in Diane Lane.
Oh, fuck yes. No,
you could
exactly.
Have started Bill Paxton maybe and flinging it over the back of his bike and driving off.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, the point being that the Loveless, that first film, was, I think, about 5 years before Near Dark. And so she went from The Loveless to Near Dark, and it took her that long to be able to get somebody to say, yes, here is some money, and it's not a lot of money, but here's some money, to make your fucked up vampire Western written by this insane dude over here, from Texas, who won't write about anything except people driving down the highway killing people.
And then 3 years later, they teamed up again and did Blue Steel.
Yes, exactly.
They shifted all this madness to New York, and there's still a scene that's almost straight out of the Hitcher in Blue Steel, near the end, where Jamie Lee Curtis just basically rams her car into Ron Silver and sends him flying. And of course, he gets up again, just like John Ryder in The Hitcher. But talk about fetishistic. The opening credits to Blue Steel, these long, loving tracking shots around the Smith & Wesson 38.
Well, yeah, and her fetishism, her willingness to dive into the details of things. That close up of a mosquito at the beginning of Near Dark, and that's when you realize that this is, in retrospect, that this is a very different kind of vampire movie. These people aren't counts. These people they don't come from, they don't come from Latvia. They're not, they're not Hannibal Lecter. These are people who are like the equivalent of mosquitoes. They live fast and they live hard. And they are here to suck your blood. They are here to take everything out of you. They are here to just, and you kill them or they kill you. That's the way it goes. But in the middle of it is also that moment of May coming out of, under the sodium light, of that very buggy night where Caleb is just standing around, shooting the shit with his friends, making bad jokes, and she comes out and her hair is like a halo. She's licking an ice cream cone that she probably can't even eat. Yeah. She's doing it because she knows how it makes her look.
Well, yes.
Yeah, and she sees him, and instead of being like, you know, I'm going to take you somewhere and kill you, that undercurrent that you have with all the other vampires when they deal with their prey.
Yeah.
You know, she's like, oh, there he is. That guy that I've been waiting for.
Yeah.
What is this?
Somebody
What
she
is
can
this?
talk to about how the light will, when that sunlight, when that starlight gets here in a million
about
years.
how bright and loud the night is.
Yeah,
someone.
You couldn't possibly have that. You can't possibly imagine having that conversation with Homer or Severin or Jesse or Diamondback. It's just like
Jesse and Diamondback are the closest to having that conversation, but no, not even with each other.
As somebody once said, as Frankie Boyle once said in a different context, it'd be a bit like trying to get an Amazonian tree frog to understand the plot of Blade Runner. You know,
it's
the same kind of level of.
It's very much like that, and you know the way that in every shot there's something interesting happening, something you haven't seen before, or at least at the time something I hadn't seen before. I had never seen a movie that dark. Now the interesting thing is that when I started out on my slide towards horror, I found it very difficult to watch actual horror movies, and because horror is very, direct, and it's very confrontational, particularly in a movie where you're dealing with sound and you're dealing with, being immersed almost in like a bath of anxiety. And, so I would, I remember seeing things like Company of Wolves. I remember seeing things like, the stuff that always, or Cat People, the stuff that was sort of more about sexuality and more about fantasy, and you could tell that it took place in a different universe, often a universe where things were artificial. It's like you don't look at anything really in Company of Wolves and go, wow, that exists in the real world.
No.
It's like, because it doesn't. It's like,
but if you do think that exists in the real world, then I'd like to know where you got the mushrooms from.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody built that. So often I would be attracted to the more darker forms of fantasy and the darker things in fantasy. The fetishism, the non-con, as people say these days, or the dub-con, but and the mythology, and Near Dark strips out almost everything that you expect to find in a vampire movie, but it is the vampire movie. It is, and the darkness is absolute in a lot of weird ways, and it's so American. It is so American. Live fast, die young. Don't leave a beautiful corpse. It's like these people, they're like, they're going to be like roadkill at the side of, in the middle of not even at the side of the road, in the middle of the road, and they don't give a fuck. They, it's like, it's like listening to Boss's "I Don't Give a Fuck" for the first time. Not a single fuck, not a solitary fuck, not a fuck, motherfucker. There's just something innately gangsta about it, gangster and gangsta, and because it peels back to the oldest form of gangsta, which is the outlaw family, the cannibal family.
It's like reading, because I watched John Milius's Dillinger a while back, and it's that kind of mentality with a lot of those kind of like Depression era outlaws like Dillinger, and partly it's a sociopathic thing, but of course there's also that kind of thing of, well, you have people who played by the rules of the American dream. They work hard and they save, blah blah blah, and the Depression comes along and just wipes that all out, and the bank comes along and robs them in a way far more brutal than anything. And so it's this kind of thing of, well, you can either play by the rules and be treated like a sucker, for however many threescore and 10, or you can a short life and a merry one. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. That's when the original Scarface came out, that was what people objected to about it, and that was why it was censored and banned in some places, because of the whole "the world is mine, all mine" thing. Because of this image of you can get ahead even if you're just a fucking stupid monkey of a man, as long as you get the right, as long as you're willing to shoot somebody, as long as you're willing to grab a Tommy gun and go, "Hey, I'm spitting,
Yeah, that's that is the thing with Paul Mooney's Scarface. I mean, it suffers obviously from the fact that he's clearly more used to a kind of stage background, but at the same time, there's a lot of very powerful qualities. And it is, he's an idiot. He's not bright, but he has.
Scarface, Brian De Palma's Scarface is a smarter guy. Tony Montana is a smarter guy.
Not that much, though, really, when you come down.
Not much, but he's smarter than that dude.
And possibly if he kept his face out of the cocaine, then he might have
Exactly. That's why they have to give him the cocaine. But to be a person who is just absolutely selfish, just absolutely driven by their own selfish desires. Yeah. And a person who's like, yeah, I'll fuck my sister because, she's the only person who loves me. And doesn't see a problem with it, really. But there's
he kind of, in both incarnations of it, he kind of does. It's the one thing he can't kind of acknowledge to himself. It's in certainly in the De Palma thing. It's her who says that. Come on, this is what you want to do. Fuck me. There's a wonderful. I think I mentioned a while back when we were interviewing Linda Rucker. There's a TV series called Knights of God, starred John. Is in this main. Well, the novelization, it's very hard to find on video, but if you get the chance, the novelization of it is worth a read. It's written by Richard Cooper, who scripted the series. Right. And he's got his style rather reminds me of Alan Garner. And there's some wonderful bits, a lovely bit of dialogue that's not in the I don't think it's in the series, but the villain of as I said, there's a lot of elements of Arthurian myth woven into it. The leader of the resistance is called Arthur, and the big bad, the guy who leads the sort of the evil kind of fascist order, the Knights of God, is Mordrin, who is his son.
Yes.
And Mordrin tries to get the main character Gervais to kill Arthur. He's basically programmed this idea into him. There's one man who's like Mordrin's greatest enemy, and he must kill him. But he doesn't kill Arthur because he realizes there's a worse enemy out there. And Arthur says, hold to that thought, that's going to destroy you. But someone asks him, well, why doesn't he just... Why did he not just kill you himself? And he goes, evil has its own land of dry plains and barren mountains. There's one yet he can't climb.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like Tony's mountain. The one mountain Tony can't climb is actually acknowledging to himself he actually wants to fuck his own sister.
Yeah, exactly. And, and so, and there's something incestuous about vampirism generally, and because it is like, this terrible thing happened to me, I did this terrible thing to you, you do this terrible thing to somebody else.
Yeah. And
I make you, you make another person, you make another person. And the person you make is always at first your victim.
Yes. At
first your victim, and you alter them so that they cannot be happy with anybody else.
Yeah, it creates a family relationship, but it also creates a sort of fucked up sexualized relationship as well.
Yeah,
that's kind of
and and that's another thing that I love about the trio. In the center of Near Dark is that you he gets the feeling they've done a lot of things. It's like nobody cares. It's like it's like close quarters.
Oh yeah, there's almost certainly been there's almost certainly been at least one three-way.
Yep. At any rate, the point being that when I first went to see it, I was just like, not quite the scales have fallen from my eyes, but it was a lot like that. It was it was just like and a little bit before that maybe was the oh god, Tony Scott, The Hunger. Was The Hunger before?
I think it may have been. Let me just Google is one's friend in these circumstances. That sounded very posh. Google is one's friend in their circumstances.
Yeah. Because again, The Hunger was this moment where I was like,
1983.
Yes, you can do that. You can just play Bela Lugosi's dead, and and cut between like 3 different things happening at the same time, cut poetically so that each image reinforces every other image. You can just have 2 people picking up 2 other people at a club and bringing them home and starting to look like they're gonna have sex with them and then killing them. You can just do that. There was just something so freeing about it. It reminded me of like the first time I read a Vertigo comic. And again, it's like information coming in through every orifice, through every way that you can get information. I'm going to show you 2 things at the same time. I'm going to make you hear 3 things at the same time. And you're going to have to put them all together yourself. So The Hunger was definitely part of that sort of a bit music video-ish, a bit tone poem-ish kind of way of looking at vampirism. But The Hunger is, although it was set ostensibly in America, maybe it's the Tony Scott thing, but it is very, very European in its intent. It actually not that I had seen Jean Rollin at that time, but it reminds me in retrospect of a Jean Rollin kind of vampire film.
Yeah, I can see it.
And still, it's like people who are very classy, people who are rich, people who, play classical music, et cetera, et cetera. And this, on the other hand, Near Dark, like I keep saying, so American. And to go back to the serial killer thing, I believe that Elliot Layton's seminal analysis of serial killer culture, Hunting Humans, had just come out around that time as well. But also the double punch of Skip Inspector's Light at the End versus just Clive Barker generally, had gotten me to a place where I was sort of fine with the craziness of seeing a guy fuck a wall, and the ape took hold of his upper lip and peeled it back like a balaclava. Peeled his head back like a balaclava. And here was the moment where I was like, no, you know what? I think I'm okay seeing this on screen.
And you can hear the concluding part of our deep dive into Kathryn Bigelow's Near Dark here at the same time next week. No Darkness But Ours is made possible through generous donations from horror enthusiasts just like you. If you'd like to support us, you can sign up to our Patreon and get access to exclusive content, or you can make a one-off donation via Ko-Fi. Links in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know in the comments, share and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. Let us know as well if there's anything you'd really like to hear us talking about in the future, and we'll be back with more at the same time next week.
Until then, I have been Simon Bestwick.
And I remain Gemma Files, and this has, of course, been no darkness but ours.